Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest. He was in WWF, he was in WCW, to former UWF television champion, Mr. Sonny Beach himself, Mr. Rick Allen. Welcome in. How you doing?
Thank you, John. Appreciate you having me tonight.
What's going on in your world? What are you up to?
Well, right now I own a security guard company out here in Long Island, and we're doing a lot of stuff for the holidays. And I have a security training school that I go on location, and I also have classes at my location in Levittown, Long Island. And this week I'm teaching at the Queens Library over in, I guess it's Long Island City, Queens, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then I'm off for 2 days, Thursday and Friday. Then I'm teaching again at my school on Saturday in Levittown. And then I'm taking 2 weeks off for the holidays.
Nice,
Looking
very cool.
for Christmas.
Yes, awesome. With what you're doing now, security-wise, obviously New York, still staying in the New York area, huh? I mean, you're a New York guy.
Yeah, we're licensed in New York, New Jersey, Florida, and Texas right now, our security company. It's called American Protection Bureau.
Was that after wrestling? Did you get into security, or during
Well,
wrestling you were doing
believe it
it?
or not, I was in it before wrestling. When I went to college, I was a bouncer, and I was bouncing my way through college, paying for my tuition and living expenses and stuff. Working a couple nights, 2-3 nights a week at the nightclubs and stuff in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Valdosta, Georgia. So while I was wrestling, I was still bouncing, and then I was going to college and trying to get a criminology degree, and kind of like worked in twofold. Like I was going to be a police officer before I was a wrestler, and I was starting to wrestle when I was going to the police academy down in Jacksonville, Florida, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. So I was going through the academy, and I was working like championship wrestling from Florida down in Tampa. I was doing stuff, Peach State wrestling for a guy named Ben Masters. Then I started doing a lot of stuff with Southern Championship up in Atlanta, Georgia for Jerry Blackwell. And started doing, all those promotions, working wherever I could, independence, wherever I could get booked. And then I got a call from Vince McMahon for No Holds Barred in 1988. So the same year I was going into the police academy and going to Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, I got called to do the movie, and then they hired me right after the movie to work full time with the WWF. So I never went into law enforcement. So
Damn,
it was
damn.
cool. But starting pay for a Jacksonville Sheriff's Office entry level employee back then in the late 80s was like $29,000-$30,000 a year. Plus you get a take home car, and you can work off duty employment in your uniform. But McMahon offered me, I told him I was making, I lied to him. I said I'm making about 50,000 a year being a cop. So he offered me like 150,000, and I said okay. And he goes, well, the worst case scenario, if you don't want to wrestle anymore, you go back and be a policeman. So that was pretty good advice. But went into wrestling, I never looked back.
That's awesome, and obviously, No Holds Barred is kind of like a cult classic with wrestling fans. A lot of wrestling fans absolutely love that movie.
Yeah, it was a pretty good break for me, actually. I got to be in the first fight scene in the bar with a wrestler named Joe LeDuc, and we were called the Headbangers. I was a short headbanger, and I was almost, 6 inches taller than Joe, and Joe was a short headbanger. So it was pretty funny. They put a lot of comedy in it. And then I got to become good friends with Stan Hansen, which we're still friends today. And we do a lot of stuff together, our families and stuff when he comes to town. And stuff like that. So I made some lifelong friendships out of being in that movie, and I helped one of my good friends, Ray Lloyd Glacier. I don't know if you know him,
Oh,
but
very well.
I got Ray in the wrestling business, so I got him a small extra part in No Holds Barred too. And he came and stayed with me when we were filming in Atlanta, Georgia.
Amazing, and now he's doing the Unbreakable Bunch. He's got his own movie with
Yeah,
Stan Hansen making a surprise appearance of all people.
yeah. I thought Sonny Beach was going to make an appearance, but it looks like Ray forgot about his old buddy Sonny Beach.
Oh man, damn! You're too
No, it
busy
was
with your day job, you know.
yeah. I mean, he just put some stuff together down in Florida, and I was unavailable, and he already had everything booked at the time. But I'm sure it would have sold a lot more tickets if Sonny Beach was in the movie.
Definitely. What
Tell
was
him I
it?
said that.
Oh, I will. Oh, I'm going to bust his balls about that for sure.
He didn't
What?
give me a payback. He forgot about his old buddy Sonny Beach.
Yes, yes. I'm going to mention that. What was it like working with Zeus?
Zeus, Tiny Lister, he was a great guy. I mean, he was an actor, and he was an athlete. I mean, he was strong as an ox. I mean, we would go to the Gold's Gym while we were filming down there, and we'd all work out together. And he was repping out with like 405 on the bar and everything, benching, and he was just like Bruce strength, like he was just all jacked up. I mean, he was a big guy, and he could work out, and he was just. Uh, he wasn't a wrestler, so when they brought him in to fight Hogan and all that stuff, and try to capitalize off the movie, he wasn't a wrestler, so he was very limited at what he could do in the ring. But they tried to work with him and stuff. But he was a great guy. We got along great. We would eat on the movie sets together. We'd go out to like diners and stuff at night, after the filming, and go to the club and stuff with Tiny. So he was just a really nice guy, and we really bonded, on the movie set, everybody that was working together. Ray would go out with us, Stan, Tiny Lister, Joe the Duke. So, all the guys filming, I mean, it was like a camaraderie, but we were all friends and we would all hang out after the filming and stuff. And sometimes we were filming 10, 12-hour days and stuff down there in Atlanta.
Man, a crazy schedule there. That's
Oh yeah,
a
you
long
get
day.
like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, go to makeup, you go to the set designer and get your costumes, and then hurry up and wait, as they say in the movie
Yes.
business. So we'd be there, and we wouldn't start shooting sometimes to 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we'd do about probably 2, 3 hours of fight scenes and stuff. And we didn't really practice too much of the scene. We just ad libbed everything in the ring, and just did everything right there. And we had a stunt coordinator. His name was Buck McDancer, and really good guy. He worked on a lot of westerns and films in Hollywood and stuff, and he was just a pleasure to work with. And the director, real good guy too, Robert. I think it was Rackamil, and just the whole production crew was really awesome down there in Atlanta. We were only there for like a week or 10 days filming our scene, so it wasn't that long. But then right after that, I hit the road and got a booking sheet and was out with WWF for about 2 years, and pretty solid, for 88 and 89, and then part of 90. So and then they would use me sparingly, if somebody didn't show up at one of the shows or something, or they needed some extras, if it was like Nassau Coliseum or the Garden, or, like the tri-state area, Connecticut, or because I was living in Brooklyn at the time after, I shot the movie. I moved up here when I was working for Vince.
How did he find you? Like, how did he know who you were? Like, how did he get in touch with you?
From what I heard, Joe Pedicino and Gordon Soley had a show called Pro Wrestling. I think it was This Week or something like that. And I think Joe Pedicino was like campaigning for me to get a role, and they wanted somebody that nobody really knew too much, like sort of like an unknown guy, and they wanted somebody tall with blonde hair, and they pitched me, and they liked me, and all of a sudden I got a call from Pat Patterson, and they go, "We'd like you to be in a movie with Hulk Hogan, No Holds Barred." And I said, "Yeah, right." I thought somebody was ribbing me, joking around.
Yeah, yeah.
I said, "Yeah, this is Pat Patterson." "Yeah, right." He goes, "I'm serious. It's me." And I said, he goes, "Take down this number. Call me back." And I took down the number, hung up, called him back, and it was Titan Sports, like Titan Towers. How could I help you? And I'm like, oh my God, I just hung up on Pat Patterson. But
Not
he
good.
put me right through, and he goes, "Look, we get that a lot. The boys rib each other." He goes, "I get it." He goes, "I thought, this isn't a rib." He goes, "It's a shoot." He goes, "We want you to be in the movie." And I said, "Well, I'm about to be a police officer." And, so they told me, "All right, do you want to do it or not?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." He goes, "Well, what's the worst you could do?" But I said, "Well, if I do take off, then I don't know if I'll get this job." They go, "Well, we'll give you a job." So I was like, "Okay." I go, "What could you give me?" And they gave me a year deal, and I was like, "Okay." So I took it, and then a year turned into like 2 years, and everything worked out really good for me. And I never went back into law enforcement, or even thought about it till after. And I wrestled after WWF. I probably wrestled about 12 more years after I did No Holds Barred. I stopped in about 2000, doing the local, spot shows and independents and stuff like that. So, after Herb Abrams, that was the last really promotion or federation I worked for. And then I just did, like local spot shows here and there around, and autograph signings and conventions and stuff like that. And then uh, I knew, about 99, I was going to get out of wrestling. So I went back to John Jay College and got my security management degree from John Jay College in Manhattan. And I started my own security business in 1999. I took the test, New York State. I got my watch guard and patrol agency license, and I started hiring guards and started putting them out there on the street and started working. So right now I have over 300 employees that work for me.
Wow, amazing. Damn. That's
Yeah, it worked out really
great.
good. So I've been
You
very
know,
blessed.
I just talked to a few months ago, Kurt Fuller, who played Brell in that movie. Now I was thinking about it. He
Yeah.
loved it. He loved that movie. He loved Hogan. He loved it. I was
Oh
kind of
yeah.
surprised.
I saw them. Me and Stan Hansen did a signing for Tommy Fierro, 80s WrestleCon,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
over at the Menon Auditorium in New Jersey, and Kurt Fuller was there. So we all got pictures with him and everything, and he was wearing his no holds barred denim jacket that they gave all the crew for shooting the movie. I actually lost mine years ago. I wore it somewhere to a show or something. Somebody robbed it from me. So
Wow.
that
Damn.
one in my Ribera jacket when I was in Japan, uh, another jacket that got robbed from me. So, when you go in the back and when you're wrestling and you don't have anybody watching your stuff in the locker room, and then somebody walks off with stuff, that's not really cool. So,
Yeah.
it's just a jacket. I mean, it's materialistic things, but it had the No Holds Barred had more sentimental value than the Ribera jacket. But, hopefully, if I ever get back to Japan, or I'll get to go to Ribera and get another jacket.
Yeah. That no holds barred jacket sounds awesome. I mean, that just
Yeah, it
sounds like
was
a
denim
cool
and it
line.
said Rip 'em on it, like
Yep.
Hogan's character was Rip. So it said Rip 'em. And then it had, back then I was Sandy Beach. So they had Sandy Beach on my jacket. It was embroidered and stuff. And, Kurt had his name on there, and Kurt Fuller and all that. So, me and Stan got pictures with him while he was wearing his jacket. So that was pretty cool. A couple months back, earlier this spring, I think we were at the 80s WrestleCon.
Very, very cool. When you are obviously a part of WWF, like you mentioned, you were Sandy Beach. What's the difference? Like, why are you Sunny Beach versus Sandy Beach? What was the
Well,
difference?
back then, there was a DJ down in Florida, and he had the name Sandy Beach trademarked and registered as an entertainer for a DJ. And he would see me on TV, with WWF, and he says that I was discrediting his name, like as an enhancement talent, I guess, with the WWF. I was like losing a lot of my matches, or my tag team partners were losing the matches. If we were in a tag team, they would get pinned, but we lost the match. So the DJ down in Florida sent Titan Sports a registered letter with a lawyer letter saying if I didn't cease and desist using the name Sandy Beach on television, that they would sue Titan Sports and sue me personally and stuff. So I changed the name. I got my name Sunny Beach. I just traded from Sandy to Sunny, kept the beach, and the rest is history. That's the only reason I stopped using it, is because somebody said I had a trademark infringement. So
Oh,
they gave me like a warning, and I didn't want any problems with anybody. And the guy did have a DJ name registered, but he wasn't a wrestler. So, um, you know, I don't know why they even entertained it. I mean, WWF, they could have went after the guy, or they could have even bought the guy's name or likeness or whatever. But he wasn't a wrestler, and he was just a small time, party DJ down in Tampa that, I guess wanted to be a wrestler, but he wasn't, a wrestler. But that's why I had to change the name.
where did the name Sandy Beach come from? Where'd you make up that from?
Well, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, so I was always at the beach, and I wanted to do like a surfer gimmick and stuff like that. So, um, I just chose the name Sandy Beach just to, like a beach guy. But that's it was neither here nor there. It was just I grew up at the beach and hanging out down there, and it was like I had a vision type of character, and that I wanted to do, but I didn't get to really do it until I was with like UWF, where I would wear the wetsuit and stuff like that, body glove wetsuit. And in Japan, I started bringing that over there, and they really popped in Japan. I mean, when I was with All Japan, coming out with the wetsuit with the beach ball and throwing it to the crowd and everything, and the surf gimmick, and it went over pretty big.
When
So
you're in WWF, right? Initially, '88, I guess it is, right? When you're there, What do they tell you? You're just going to be used a lot, and you're going to be like an enhancement guy, or you're going to be used a lot and you're going to be, featured and going to be a part of the television?
Well, they didn't really feature me too much. I was more, I would get guys over and, like build them up, to have feuds with other people. And funny thing was they would let me work at the house shows. I got a lot of wins at house shows and stuff, like down in Florida. That's with St. Augustine, the little, like small towns and stuff like that, like out west, Iowa and all that. And, I'd wrestle like guys like Lanny Poffo, DJ Peterson back then. Who else? SD Jones. I mean, there was a bunch of guys. Cowboy Scott Casey. It was like middle of the card stuff. Um, right before a main event, they put me on or something. Battle Royals, they would let me work. My first week in the WWF, I was one of the last two guys, like me, Hercules Hernandez, Ultimate Warrior, and Greg Valentine were 20-man Battle Royal. We were the last four in the ring together. And they were letting me work, And so it was it was pretty good. I don't know if they were just testing me or see what I could do, but it was fun, to work with these guys. And then they would put me and Mike Sharp. We would tag a lot together, and like against Demolition or some of these bigger teams out there. I would work a lot against the Young Stallions, heel team. So I was just getting guys over, and we were having good matches, and it was just work for me, and I was just honing my skills because I was still a little green, at the time when I came into WWF, but put me with some veterans like Scott Casey, Lanny Poffo, they're so guys. It was like a night off working with those guys. It was, it was great. Everything. I learned a lot from those guys on the road. When we were working WWF, we used to have three shows a night. The A, B, and C team. Going out to different cards. They'd have like the Hogan card, they'd have the Andre card, or Macho Man card, or Ultimate Warrior. And then they would have, a couple main event guys like a Greg Valentine or a Rick Rude or somebody on top, on one of these other towns. So it was, we'd wrestle like out of a 30-day month, we'd probably wrestle 2 weeks on, 3 days off, 2 weeks on, 2 days off, 3 weeks on, 2 days off. So that's how it was going. You only have like 3 to 4 days off a month, out of a 30-day month. You'd go home, pay your bills, do your laundry, and then get back on the road. They'd fly you out to another town. But
Crazy life back then. Jeez.
yeah, and you be wrestling like the same guy in a different town every night. Like you were married, with the guy like Scott Casey, or like the Rockers used to work the Conquistadors a lot. Every town, or whoever it was. You'd have I forgot who else was a big draw back then. I think the Rougeos and the Bulldogs, and it was like all different teams together, and it was good. Everybody was making money, everybody got along. There wasn't too many egos back then, so it was like you had your WWF family. You're on the road with, and you get close with a lot of guys. You're traveling with them. You're going to breakfast with them every morning. You're going to the gym with them every day. You're working with them at night. You're staying at the same hotels and riding together to different shows. 3, 4 guys in a car together. Saving money. So, I mean, it was a good learning experience for me. I was only 24 years old when I started WWF.
Wow, that young. Damn, I didn't realize how young you were when you started.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
I'm only 61 right now, and I've been out of the wrestling business since 2000. So, I mean, I got in and got out pretty quick.
When you look back right at that time, any sort of relationship with Hogan back then?
Not really. I mean, we got, I got to meet him the first time I met Hogan in person was at No Holds Barred on the set. And then he would come and eat lunch with us, or he'd go to the gym with us and stuff. He was there for like 2, 3 weeks, in Atlanta filming everything. But and then he would fly out on the weekends, do some house shows and stuff, go back, and they kept him really busy, back then. And I think he was, having a baby too. I don't know if it was Brooke or Nick that was born back then, but I know one of his kids was born right at, the time when he was shooting No Holds Barred back in '88. So I mean, I've never been really close to Hogan, but we see each other, at an autograph show or something like that. Say hello. He remembers me and stuff like that, and everybody remembers, Hogan. But he just had his own little clique that he would hang out with, and he was more, with Vince all the time or with his wife, and he would, he was the first class, guy in the plane, or he was private planes and limousines, and we're, regular guys, traveling, renting a Lincoln and going from town to town, or whatever type of car you'd get, and load up three or four guys in the car and go, But he'd have his own locker room, his own dressing room and stuff, and all the other boys were in another part of the arena or locker room. So it wasn't like we were interacting every day with Hogan.
What about Vince? Any sort of relationship at all with Vince?
Not at all. He was just the office guy. He was your boss, and he'd come to TVs. He'd be there doing production meetings and, talking to talent, doing interviews with guys, telling them what to do and everything. And, back then, Gorilla Monsoon was there, Pat Patterson, Jerry Briscoe. He had his own agents. Chief Jay Strongbow was an agent at the time. Tony Gurria, Rene Goulet was an agent, Blackjack Lanza. So, it was like, back then, even Grizzly Smith was an agent when I first started with WWF. Jake's father was still there, and Arnold Skolin was still there. So, I mean, when I was there, I still had a lot of old school guys that were still around hanging out. And, Freddie Blassie was in and out of TVs once in a while. I'd see him a lot of TV tapings back before he retired. So, it was like, you know, wrestling royalty back then. It was still, a lot of the golden era wrestling guys were still involved with the business.
Did you get a chance to see the McMahon documentary at all?
I did see some of it. I didn't see all of it, but I saw, bits and pieces of it. And pretty much it's mostly spot on. I thought they did a real good job at interviewing him. And, Vince only wants you to know what Vince wants you to know. It's like, the Wizard of Oz, and he's the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So that's how, a good analogy that, like Vince. But Vince was a self-made guy, and he took a lot of risk, and, and he made wrestling what it is today. So I give the man credit, like him or not. He really did a good job putting it together, and, like taking talent from the territories back then, poaching talent. And he had a vision where he wanted it global, not just regional. So he took it to the next level, and he did it on his own. He did it his way. Corporate
Any?
sponsorships,
Yeah.
all that stuff, the merchandise. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine. Believe me, Titan Sports, WWE now.
Did you notice any sort of chicanery? Like, obviously, they talk about a lot in the documentary, the Ring Boy scandal, like the different scandals going on at the time. When you were there, did you notice or see anything
Oh
that was
yeah, I
going
was
on?
there with the Ring Boy stuff. I was there, and Mel Phillips and all those guys, and there was definitely some shenanigans going on, but it was never talked about. Like people knew what was going on, but nobody, brought it to nobody's attention. They turned a blind eye to it. A lot of people knew that.
Vince, too, turned a blind eye to it?
I'm pretty sure he knew about it, or Patterson and Terry Garvin and all those guys. They were all, you know, what are you going to do? Rat on the guy that's your boss or something, or the guy that books you. So it was like everybody knew, but nobody said anything, which is sad. Very.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, crazy if you think about some of that stuff. What about the steroids as well? Was that as prevalent as we kind of think, or as
Oh,
been
it was
talked about?
definitely back in the 80s. I mean, a lot of stuff, I guess you go to any gym, any hardcore gym, you could have got steroids anywhere back in the 80s. Dianabol, Deca, testosterone, it was flowing like candy. It was like, candy store. You go in there and you order what you want, or the gym owner had a guy, this guy knows a guy, or this guy's selling at this gym or that gym. And, in the locker room, it was prevalent. Everybody was, doing juice back then in the 80s. But, and once they had that scandal and the trial and stuff, everybody was trying to, play hush hush and cover everything up. And nobody wanted to get anybody in trouble. And nobody really, back then, back kayfabe was still pretty strong, in the wrestling business. They didn't pull the curtain back and like they do now and let you see everything. So the boys would protect each other, and they weren't going to rat on each other. This guy's doing juice, that guy's doing juice. you know it by you could tell by looking at them who was doing it. So, we're not all stupid. I mean, I never was a big juice guy or nothing like that. I've tried it a couple of times, but I wasn't that guy doing it all the time. And when I was with WWF, I didn't do anything. I mean, it's just a regular guy. But most of the other guys on the roster that were getting big pushes and had those $1 million bodies, you know who they are. They're the ones that were doing it a lot, right in front of you in the locker room too.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Crazy times back then.
It was, and it was like the Wild West. Anything goes. People were always looking to get bigger, stronger, faster. Who could be the biggest guy in the gym? Who could be the strongest guy in the gym or at TVs? So, that's how the guys made their money back then. The Lex Luger bodies, that $1 million body or
Yeah.
Ultimate Warrior. Those two are poster boys for juice.
It's great, like looking at your career, right? WWF, but then, like you mentioned, you were in Japan, you were in Canada, right? You were in Stampede a little bit. Like you were kind of all over the place. You
Calgary.
you definitely
Well,
were traveling a lot.
I had the luxury. I mean, I was well liked in the business. I didn't have any, vices or nothing. I never did drugs. I never took pills. I never smoked a joint. I mean, I would drive guys around, when they'd be getting high in the back. But,
Right.
I never condoned it, and I didn't want to do it. So I chose not to do it. What other people do is on them. I don't ever judge anybody. If people are nice to me, I'm going to be nice to them. But, there was a lot of times when we'd have piss tests and I'd have to pee for other people and stuff like that, and
Yep.
and if Hogan said we're not going to have a piss test, then we're going to have a piss test, and it was it was another time back then. They were trying to be strict and everything, but I got to travel the world and I got to make a lot of good friends, and I got to get in on that like territory stuff. I started out championship wrestling from Florida in Tampa, the Florida territory. Then I went up to Georgia and did like Peach State and Southern Championship. That was like a whole nother territory. Then I got to go out to Global for a tag team tournament when Joe Pedicino was running that out there, and go to the Sportatorium and work for Global. And I got to travel all over. I went to Stampede. Owen Hart actually got me booked up there for Stampede after I left WWF. Um, Owen said, "Hey, you want to come up to Stampede?" I said, "Yeah." And then Bulldog started booking when I came up there. They brought me up there. They brought Randy Colley, Moondog. They brought who else was up there when I went up there? Larry
Benoit, right? Chris Benoit.
Benoit. I wrestled Benoit for the Commonwealth Championship up in his hometown of Edmonton when I was up at Stampede. Did a couple of TV tapings, but the money wasn't right up there. They were playing with your money, and it was so cold up there. It was like 30 below zero when I went up there. And I'm a surfer guy from Jacksonville, Florida,
Right.
and froze. I mean, I never want to be in that kind of cold ever again in my life. I mean, New York's pretty bad in the winters, but Calgary was like you were miserable there. And they put me up in this hotel called the York Hotel where all the boys would stay. And then there was a gym, BJ's gym, that one of the brothers owned that was married to one of the Hart sisters. They had their own gym up there. And, all you would do up there is work out and stay in your hotel room. There was nothing to do. You couldn't go outside or you freeze to death. And I didn't have the proper snow like clothes to wear up there. I didn't have a heavy duty winter jacket, and so when I got up there, I had to go buy long johns because nobody smartened me up. Calgary's 30, 40 degrees below zero in the winter, and I went up there like January and February of I think it was 89 or 90. I think 89. I went there between some of my WWF shows. They put me up there, and I was going to work a program. They were bringing in. Who were they bringing in? I guess it was Bruce Hart and Brian Pillman. They were a tag team up there, and then they split up, and Pillman went back down, I guess, and worked somewhere. But he was coming back up. When he came back up, um, I was 2 weeks into my tour up there, and I was, working guys like the Power Twins up there. I forgot who else I worked up there. I worked Benoit a couple times. Then I worked a couple other boys up there. I think it was a guy named Biff Wellington or somebody I worked with, and Goldie Rogers, and uh, there was. I know Muck and Singh was there. Mike Shaw, who was Norman the Lunatic, and then he was Bastion Booger with WWF. He was there. Um, Gary Albright was up there, real good guy, Larry Cameron. So I mean, they had a great, I mean, team up there, guys that lived up there and were working up there, breaking into business. Bad News Allen, I think he was from up in Calgary or lived up there. I saw him a few times when I was up there, and he was still working with Vince. He would come to the gym. Bulldogs were always in and out of the gym, or they were going back and forth to Japan at the time for All Japan. So, um, it was nice. I mean, for the first couple of weeks, it was good, but then the van started breaking down, and I had to take like a Trailways or Greyhound bus back. Like one time, a bus broke down, or the van broke down in Edmonton, and we had to take like a 3-4 hour ride back to Calgary on a Trailways or a Greyhound bus. And it was just, the money, you know, they promise you a certain guarantee, and then they short you by like half, and you have to pay for your hotel room and then food and everything. And it was just, I wasn't making any money there, and it was so cold. And I said, I'm out of here. So I just took off. They go, oh, well, you're booked for a couple of months. I said, well, if you're not paying me and you breached the contract, I said, I'm not going to be, hanging out up here and not getting paid and stuck in a hotel room in the freezing weather. So I left and came back to New York.
And how the heck did you meet Herb Abrams and end up in the UWF? Because obviously you're a big part of that Vice series, Dark Side of the Ring, on that. But how'd you end up with Herb?
Well, you're going to love this story. There was a lady named Georgianne Macropolis, and she lived in Astoria, Queens. And she had like a fan club and a newsletter called Wrestling Chatterbox. And I was friends with her living in New York and stuff. And she would come to the shows and all that stuff. So I became friends with her. And she was really good friends with Bruno Sammartino. So she was talking to Bruno and saying, yeah, Sandy Beach lives in New York now. They would call me Sandy still. And this is right when I was turning into Sunny Beach, I guess, and changing the name. Or she would always call me Sandy anyway, because that's how she first met me. So a lot of people that know me for a while would call me Sandy. Some would call me Sunny. But she introduced me to Bruno. And I met Bruno a couple of times at WWF TVs and stuff. And Bruno said, hey, there's a guy, Herb Abrams, coming to town. He's starting a promotion. He goes, how would you like to work for him? I said, I'd love to. I said, could you make that happen? He goes, yeah, I'll put a good word in for you. Bruno's the one that got me, believe it or not, booked with Herb Abrams. And I
Wow.
got to meet Herb Abrams. John Arizzi had a convention, one of the first conventions he did up here, and Herb was at the convention. So I got to meet Herb there. Bruno was there, everybody. So we met. We all hung out. We went out to dinner. Herb took a liking to me. And I never knew Herb from a hole in the wall. I didn't know anything about him. Just a new promoter coming into New York wanting to do TV. So they put me together with him. He goes, hey, I could use you. I'm going to definitely give you a push and use you the right way in my promotion. I said, I'd love to help you. So um, I helped him do some of the local booking, get him some local talent and stuff. And I was still working out at Gleason's gym with Bobby Bold Eagle, and uh, Johnny Rods was there too. He had a school there. So we were doing a lot of training down there. And I got a lot of guys from the gym and working with Johnny and Bobby that, work for Herb Abrams and stuff. So I booked like some of the under guys for him on the car, TV taping, stuff like that. The Power Twins lived over in Massapequa, Long Island, Plain Edge. So they would I got them booked with Herb too, and they were working. And who else? There was a couple of guys that we got. A guy Mike Williams, he would work a lot with Herb. We got back then, I guess it was Sal Sincere or um,
Tom Brady.
Tom Brandy. Yeah, we got Tom with us, and a lot of local guys. Mike Iorio, they called him Primo Canero the third, or so. We had a lot of guys around the area. Even Bubba Ray Dudley, back when he was called Mongo Vile. I booked him on a bunch of local shows around here for us and stuff. Skull Von Crust, Vito, Big Vito. There was a little clique, back around in Long Island, New York, Brooklyn area, working out. And Vito was working a lot with Johnny and stuff like that. He was one of Johnny's main guys, training guys for him. Before that, there was a couple other guys. What was the one kid's name? Phil. I forgot what he was called when he was with Johnny. But one of the guys, I forgot Phil. I can't remember his last name. But he went to Vince too right after Johnny trained him and stuff. And he was a really good hand too. But that's how I got booked with Herb. Bruno Sammartino put a good word in for me, and once Herb started doing shows, started working a lot with him, and then I started promoting a lot of my own shows too around the tri-state area too. Me and Mick Foley would work a lot with like Tommy D and some of these other local promoters out here in Long Island and stuff. Um, there's a guy named Bob Raskin, and Rob Russin. Rob Russin had an IWA show, and I was on with that. Me and the Terminator, Mark Laurinaitis, were the first tag team champions with the IWA, and they had a contract with Sports Channel America that we run like every week up here in the New England area, tri-state area, in Pennsylvania. So it was good, doing the territories, working a lot with different guys. And the funny thing was, like, I worked with Mark Laurinaitis, and I worked with Johnny Ace. We were tag teaming all Japan together for the 1991 World Tag League Championships in Japan. So, and then they put me with Del Wilkes in Japan, the Patriot, and we were a tag team for a while. And I did a lot of singles matches too in Japan, which is pretty fun. They would put me over more in Japan than anywhere else. It was great.
What did
Oh
you
no,
think about Johnny Ace? What did you think about Johnny?
now or back then?
Well, I guess both.
Well, Johnny was always and always has been about Johnny Ace. I mean, you could ask most of the boys in the business. It was all about me instead of we as a tag team. So Johnny, he was a good worker. He was very over in Japan, but if anybody came over there and threatened his position in Japan or got over more than he did, he put a kibosh to you. So he was good friends with Miss Baba and the promoters over there. And if he didn't like you, or if you were maybe threatening his position with the company, then see ya. You know.
Hmm.
So that's what I heard happened to me in Japan. I only went on 2 tours over there,
So
and
you got two over?
well, I was getting over pretty strong over in Japan, believe it or not. I don't know if it was the people. I mean, the people were behind me over there. I mean, you could watch any of our matches and stuff, and I had a very good following in Japan. And the promotion would let me work. I mean, it wasn't like they put the brakes on you like they did here. They would let you work and get over, and if they liked you, they'd give you a little push. And they actually liked me in Japan, so I was very happy and very fortunate. Stan Hansen's got me booked in Japan, so I never wanted to make him look bad. So I always tried to work to the best of my abilities over there and do whatever they asked me to do. And I got over, decent over there. So I was very happy with my career in Japan.
Did you like that style? Obviously, it's a bit of a rougher style,
Oh
the
yeah,
strong
I
style, if you
love
will.
the style over there. I mean, just watching some of the tapes, like the Malenko brothers, Joe Malenko and Dean Malenko, and like watching Terry Gordy and Steve Dr. Death Williams over there working against those guys too was a blessing, because I like working that strong style, and I was just as big as those guys, so they would. Ask or they would request to work with me, or and we'd have good matches. And it's good when you work with guys your own size and stuff like that because it makes it a little more believable.
I love that you and Johnny Ace are a team over there. You know what I mean? Just that
Well, the
great like
blonde hair,
yeah,
it looked like we gelled pretty good. I mean, which and that was the first time we ever tagged together too. So we didn't really get to work out together or practice anything or do too much. I think if we'd have spent a little more time together, I think, or if he was up to it to accept that we were a tag team, instead of just wanting the big push for himself. I think we could have did a lot better in Japan, or I could have got booked a lot more in Japan, to be honest.
you could have been another dynamic dude with him. Remember, he was in the dynamic dudes.
I don't know about a dynamic dude, but I think we could have definitely been a better tag team, maybe. I mean, nothing against Shane Douglas. I like Shane Douglas. He's a great guy. I met him a handful of times. I never got to work with him or against him, or I think we've been on a couple of the same cards once or twice together. But that would have been great. Maybe the two or even the three of us together could have done something sort of like the Freebirds or something like that. But I pitched a couple of different ideas, but nothing I pitched really stuck or anything. But you never know. All you could do is ask or try to give somebody an idea, put something in somebody's head, and see if they can run with it, or somebody will like it. Back then, we were doing our own interviews, our own promos. We didn't have a creative team. We had a booker booking the talent, booking the matches, and giving the finishes, but we didn't have a whole creative team like they do now, or writers and all that. We never had that back when I was wrestling.
Going back to UWF with Herb, obviously that documentary. I mean, it gives you like an insight of like his, doing cocaine, and he's got these women, and where's he getting the money from, and is he doing scrupulous stuff, like all this stuff. But how much of that is like true? How much of that is legend? What's the real Herb?
The real Herb, believe it or not, he was a funny guy. He was a short little guy. I mean, he was fun to be around. He was happy go lucky. Herb did things his way. He liked the hookers. He liked the cocaine. He liked to have a good time. But he did it on his own time. He didn't do it on my time. And like I said before, I don't judge people. If they're nice to me, I'm twice as nice to them. And he always treated me and my family nice. He would come to my house. We would have cookouts. He would come over for Sunday dinner. My wife's Italian. She would cook dinner for everybody. He would take us out for dinners. We go to Peter Luger's or restaurants. He'd pay for everything. So he treated me very well. So I don't have anything really bad to say about him. But did he have a problem with girls or hookers or getting drunk? Yeah, maybe. But he did it on his own time, and he wasn't, forcing it down your throat. He would do it at his own expense and his own leisure. Like sometimes he would do stupid things like at TV tapings. Some of the boys, they wanted to party and they wanted to pay for everything. And, some of the wrestlers live that lifestyle. They like to party. They like the hookers. They like the pills. They like the cocaine. They like to drink. So be it. That's what they do. And I don't judge. And I never did any of that stuff. But you know, Herb would get around these guys and they would, like, Herb, let's go party. Let's go do this. Let's do a line. And I'm like, Herb, we got a show tomorrow. You should be, getting ready for the show. I
Really?
was like the voice of reason, or I would say, guys, come on, make him stop. He's got to be ready tomorrow. This is bullshit, And Lenny Duke, God bless him. He kept Herb, on the beaten path, the straight and narrow, because he was his producer. He would produce the shows. He was his Hollywood contact. Lenny Duke worked for Johnny Carson's show, and then for Jay Leno after that for NBC for a lot of years. And he's got his own production company, and he's the one that got Herb, a lot of these television deals, and got the tapes ready to send overseas and stuff like that. So Lenny was the voice of reason with Herb, and Lenny could keep Herb in control a lot of times, talk, on the business end of it and stuff like that. But if it wasn't for Lenny, I think, there wouldn't have been a UWF, to be honest.
It's crazy if you look at it. Like, man, he's gotten Bruno and Andre, and he's gotten like these huge, huge stars and names
Rocco, he
in
had
UWF.
Valentine, he had Honky Tonk, he had Rick Rude. You don't know how many guys from Vince were ready to come over. I mean, he had everybody that was ready to go. He had Sid at his pay-per-view out at Blackjack Brawl. I mean, he had, the cream of the crop. Once Andre came over, Vince got scared because, Andre's my guy,
Yeah,
how is he going to leave WWF after all these years? But Andre was tired of all the nonsense. But Andre was a businessman and he knew that he wouldn't make the same money that he would make with Vince. So that's why he left Herb and went right back to Vince. But Andre was already past his prime and he was already injured and hurt. And, he couldn't really move around good in the ring anyway when, Herb hired him anyway. But the name and the draw, it was still there. If you had Andre the Giant, if you had Bruno San Martino, you had Captain Lou, you had John Tolis. I mean, you had Mick Foley, Bob Orton Jr. I mean, he had a lot of Brian Blair, Jim
Doctor
Brunzell.
Death.
I mean, Dr. Death, Terry Gordy. He had everybody. And if he wouldn't have squandered his money or if he had somebody to give a business plan and try to book the talent and to advertise instead of taking their money, all these guys, Paul Orndorff was with him. He had a lot of guys, all they cared about was taking his money and not, helping him out. And if he would have had people helping him and steering him in the right direction, and some of the guys shouldn't have been partying with him like they were, then maybe, I don't know if he would still be here because he had a heart condition and he didn't know about it. And that's why he ultimately passed away. Partying and doing cocaine, and you have a heart condition, something's going to give, and his heart gave. And that's why he had the heart attack and died when he was doing that stuff.
Crazy
So
lifestyle. Yeah. Big time crazy lifestyle.
it was definitely a crazy lifestyle, but nobody twisted his arm to do what he did. He did it on his own because he liked doing it, and he had a beautiful girlfriend. He was married. He had a wife when I first met him. He was still married to an Asian girl, a Chinese girl from out in California, and they got divorced. And I actually went to his divorce proceedings. He flew me out to California, and when he was getting divorced, because their family was threatening him. So I came out there to, protect him, bodyguard him, I guess. So we go to Santa Monica courthouse, and lo and behold, who was at the courthouse? Gary Coleman from Different Strokes. So Gary
Wow.
Coleman's walking in right behind us, and I'm in front of Herb. And I look back, I see Gary Coleman. I turn to Herb. I go, damn, Herb, you didn't tell me this was small claims court. Everybody busted out laughing. Gary Coleman goes, oh, you got jokes. You got jokes. And then, I was out there for like 3 days with him. He took me out to dinner, took me around Hollywood, showed me around town. I mean, not too many people would do that for somebody, but I was protecting him though, because he was afraid he was going to get hurt by uh, his ex-wife's family. So, but
Do you
then he
think
moved
it?
back to New York. So after that, he was fine. But
Do you think it could have lasted longer? Like, could they actually have been like a competitor of WCW or WWF or
I think
something
they
like
could have
that?
been the third company. That could have been like a AEW, I think, because he had the talent and he had television contacts, Sports Channel America, but he blew the money. He was blowing the money on hookers and cocaine. He wasn't reinvesting it in television or syndicating the shows or doing overseas tours. A lot of people wanted him to come overseas and do tours. Germany, he was talking to them. He was talking to Israel to go do a tour over there. Italy, France, I think Australia wanted him to come over there to one of the theme parks. So he had a lot of opportunities where he could have made extra money going on tour to some of these smaller colleges. And I told him to put together like a sales team to sell your shows to different arenas and stuff like that, or do like 2 or 3 pay-per-views a year instead of what you were doing, but have it where you're going to make money instead of lose money. Have corporate sponsors pay for the shows. And he was just getting into all that stuff when he, passed away. He had an office in Manhattan, right at, I think it was 6 or 7 Penn Plaza, right across the street from Madison Square Garden, where the Blimpie headquarters was, Blimpie Submarines. The owner of Blimpies gave him a suite, like an office suite, because they had the whole floor and they didn't need the whole floor. So they gave Herb about 4 offices and a conference room for he could have his own office and stuff. And he furnished it with all wrestling pictures. He was having business meetings there all the time. I was working for him up there, trying to book shows and all that stuff for him, and trying to get some of his shows syndicated and the tapes sold when he passed away. And everybody says, "Oh, Herb ripped me off or he owed me money," but most of the people I know, Herb would take him out for dinner. He would buy him drinks. He would, you know, pay people more than they were worth. A lot of guys. So when I hear people saying they didn't get paid or they got screwed, it's probably because they probably tried to screw Herb.
Right. Yeah, just crazy. Like when you actually think about it, like, wow, this guy out of nowhere. It's like, using WWF talent, at the wazoo, Jimmy Snuka. I mean, all the guys we mentioned, it's just like,
John,
wow, where did
everybody
this guy
liked him.
come
He
from?
was a
Yeah,
friendly
crazy.
guy, and he was well liked. Not too many people could say he was a bad guy, unless they should maybe he did give a couple of bogus checks or something like that, or bad checks, but he always made good on them. But the sad thing is, the people that talk crap about him, those are the guys that he probably paid the most money to. That's the sad part. Most of the people like Bruno, Captain Lou, he took good care of those guys. I know for a fact they made good money with him. John Tolis, if he liked you, he liked you, and he'd take care of you. And he made some decent money off some of these shows. Like not the pay-per-views, he lost a lot of money. But like I know Sports Channel gave him over $1 million for 16 episodes of UWF. They had a whole season worth of shows there, an hour show. And then they would sell I guess out of an hour show, you got 48 minutes of wrestling, you got 12 minutes of commercial time you could sell. And he was, making his money off the commercial times. And then he had a 900 number, call and talk to your favorite
Yep.
wrestlers, all that back then. And he was in a lot of magazines too. George Napolitano and Bill Apter, they liked him. He was well liked by the wrestling community. The boys liked him. He was a friendly guy. You could have fun with him. He'd make you laugh. So he was well liked, and that's why I think all the talent wanted to work for him.
I feel like you still might be the Sports Channel television champion right now.
I don't know. Back then, years ago, we did that one pay per view. I guess it was an MGM Grand where we fought for the title. Me and Dr. Feelgood. That I forgot his name, but he was managed by Missy Hyatt that day. But we had a nice little match. But I never worked with a guy before, and we didn't get a lot of sleep because everybody was up in the casino playing games and stuff,
Of course. Yeah.
and trying to find Herb the next day, and they wanted us at the arena early at MGM, and Herb was still out partying, and he had his yellow boots on. He called Mick
Infamous. Yeah.
Foley up to the room, and like Mick Foley said, all he cared about was these yellow boots that said UWF embroidered in them, and he says, "Look at what I got," and he was like so thrilled and like a kid in a candy store. He was so happy like to be part of the show and stuff. And then once the show started, he was so high. Lenny Duke was like beside himself, about what was going on. Herb straighten up, and Herb was just out of it. And then Herb's on the microphone. Let's hear it for the Jews. It was like he was trying to get the crowd behind him, and
Yeah.
and he was just very misunderstood. He just needed somebody to look over him a little bit more, maybe babysit him a little bit. When he got that way, somebody should have just put him in a room, and somebody else should have ran the show or something. But Herb did it his way,
Yeah.
but he paid the ultimate price. But he
Yeah.
was
Unfortunately.
well-liked, lovable guy, and I still defend him. He's been gone for all these years. I mean, when he passed away, I inherited his dog, Koki, a little white Shiba Inu.
Oh, nice.
So I had to take care of his dog, and I kept the dog until it died. So I looked out for him. That dog was like a child to him. We'd go to Peter Luger's Steakhouse, and this is how crazy Herb is. He'd order a steak for his dog.
Wow. My
Send it
God.
out, send it out to the car. Whether he had somebody driving him, if it was a town car or something, and the dog was in the car, the person driving, he'd send the steak out to the guy or to the car, whoever. Herb was good like that. And just, it's very sad that, he went out the way he did because he had the opportunity to do something really special. And
Definitely.
if he didn't have those demons in his closet, I think he could have succeeded. And everybody was pulling for him to succeed too. I mean, you have a world champion like Bruno. He had Beach Brawl, and he had Ivan Koloff versus Bob Backlund, two former WWF champions. Then he had Wendy Richter there. It was like he had the who's who of talent down there.
Big time.
He used a lot of Vince's former champions and people with good names in the business.
Yeah, really. I mean, just I love like going back and just looking at the lineup. It's like, man, he had stars to the roster. Ludwig Borga, was there at one point. It's like everybody was there.
Everybody wanted to work for him. I mean, anybody who left Vince or wanted to leave Vince or was renegotiating their contract with Vince, they would come to Herb, and that was like a bargaining chip for a lot of these guys. Oh, you're going to be on TV with Abrams? Oh, come back to WWF. We'll do something with you.
It definitely seemed like that because he would see that they were, on TV elsewhere. Oh, I can't have them making money for them. I got to have them. I need them back.
Yeah, and that's what happened. That's the God's honest truth of what happened. Like Rick Rude, they went to him be on TV. Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, who I think Sid came in and out.
Yep.
And somebody else, they were there, but they wouldn't let him wrestle. Somebody showed up, and I guess a lawyer. Herb flew him out there, and then they couldn't wrestle, and they just hung out and didn't wrestle. I forgot who it was, but it was another big name guy too. I'm not sure who it was. Dang, my mind's playing tricks on me now. I know, I forgot Danny Spivey was there for Herb too. So I think he was going to try to put Spivey and Sid back together as the tag team
Skyscrapers, yeah.
skyscrapers. So I think he was going to try to do something like that with them. But I think Vince called back Sid or something. I don't know. Sid was only there for like one or two shows, and that was it.
As we hit the wind down and head towards the finish here, like we talked about, obviously you worked for WWF for many years, but you worked a bunch of territories. You worked in Japan, you worked Stampede. What was your favorite territory, your favorite place to work in your career?
I'd probably say Japan. I think Japan was probably my favorite. They treated me like gold over there. I mean, Baba, his crew over there, all the Japanese boys. I got along great with everybody. Um, Stan Hansen brought me over there. Abdullah was there when I was there. Um, a lot of people I still keep in touch with. So, for them to bring me over there and think enough of me to bring me over there and let me work with them, I think that was just a blessing for me. It's one of my favorite times working and getting to travel, the world with a lot of these guys. Um, Going on these overseas tours and stuff was really, really a fun career. And I have nothing but good things, to say about it. People always ask, "Oh, you were a jobber, you were an enhanced talent," but I got to work a lot too. It wasn't like I was just laying down for people. I made people look good, and if they beat me, they weren't squashing me or nothing like that. When I first started in Florida, yeah, they were squash matches. You go in, you do a minute or two, you get the crap beat out of you, and you get pinned, and you make your $50 for the TV taping, and that was it. But um, Vince and everybody else, they took pretty good care of me. Japan, they took great care of me. Herb took great care of me. So I have nothing but good things to say about the business and, the people I was affiliated with and worked with.
Do you ever get annoyed if somebody says enhancement talent and stuff like that? Does that bother you?
I really don't because I looked at the wrestling business as a job, a career. Win, lose, or draw. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. But you're getting paid regardless. And I made a lot of money wrestling. I mean, my house is paid for. I don't have too many bills. Um, I got to travel the world for free. I got to meet a lot of nice people. I'm still friends with a lot of the boys that are still alive that I started out the business with or helped get into the business or that I work with. So, I mean, now I enjoy going to some of these autograph signings and conventions, getting to see the boys hanging out, going to dinner.